2 nights before his golden anniversary, Thomas Reeves presses his ear against the study door. His daughter Elizabeth's voice leaks through the wood, cool and rehearsed. Through the crack of the door, the words become clear. Once Mom signs the power of attorney next week, we move Dad into Sunrise Memory Care.
He won't fight it. She thinks I won't fight.
Thomas lowers his hand from the door. In the silence, a decision solidifies.
Arthur, it's Thomas. I need to rewrite my will and trust. First thing tomorrow.
He hangs up and stares at the door, the betrayal now a cold fire in his eyes. The golden anniversary was in 36 hours. He had one chance to protect his wife and his legacy. And for the first time in 50 years, Thomas Reeves prepared to fight. The night stretched long. Thomas sat alone in his study, a yellow legal pad before him.
She's had this planned for months, and I never saw it.
He wrote a single word on the pad, then underlined it twice, protect.
Mary must never know until it's done.
By dawn, he had not slept. He dressed quietly and slipped out before Mary stirred. The drive to Arthur Vance's office was short, but his mind ran every scenario.
If Elizabeth gets power of attorney, I'm done. She'll lock me away and drain everything.
He parked and stared at the old brick building, a place he'd visited for business, never for this.
Arthur's been my lawyer for 30 years. He'll know what to ask.
The clock in his dashboard read 8:02, 30 hours until the party. He stepped out into the cold morning air. The office smelled of old books and polish. Arthur Vance rose from his desk as Thomas entered, the morning light catching the silver in his hair.
You sounded strained on the phone. Whatever this is, it must be serious.
It's worse than serious. Elizabeth plans to move me into a memory care unit and seize control of everything.
Thomas told Arthur about the overheard call, the pretended affection, the clock already ticking toward the anniversary.
So you want to cut her out entirely? That's a very final step, Thomas.
She forced my hand. The estate goes into a charitable foundation. Mary directs it. Elizabeth removed as trustee. The lake house goes to Mary alone.
Arthur's pen moved across the page, drafting clauses that would lock Elizabeth out for good.
She won't see this coming, not until it's too late.
Thomas signed where indicated, his hand steady. Arthur witnessed it and applied the notary seal. The fresh will folded into his blazer pocket, the paper crisp against his chest. The trap was set. He returned home to find Mary in the living room, a photo album open on her lap, tea growing cold.
There you are. I was just looking at our wedding day. 50 years, Thomas. Half a century.
Half a century, and she wants to lock me away like a forgotten piece of furniture.
He sat beside her, pointing to a picture of them on their honeymoon, letting her nostalgia fill the silence he needed.
Elizabeth's done so much for tonight. She really wants it to be perfect.
The next afternoon, Mary stood before the full-length mirror in her champagne dress, adjusting a pearl earring with delicate hands. Thomas, in his navy blazer, watched her from the doorway, then offered his arm. Golden hour bathed the country club entrance as the valet opened their car door.
Mom, Dad, at last. The place is buzzing with love for you two.
Thomas only watched her perform, his face unreadable, the corner of his mouth barely lifting at her rehearsed warmth. Inside, the ballroom hummed with celebration. Champagne and compliments flowed freely. Elizabeth worked the room like a seasoned politician, her laugh too quick, her embraces too tight.
Daddy always said I was his favorite daughter. Tonight, I want him to see how much I've done for this family.
Thomas sipped his water and watched. Favorite daughter. She hadn't called him Daddy in 15 years.
Near the bar, Kenneth checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes, his tie already loosened.
Why did she insist on this ridiculous performance? She's going to crack if she keeps pushing it.
Mary caught Thomas's gaze across the room. Her smile didn't waver, but in her eyes flickered something older and sharper.
She's putting on quite a show.
Thomas touched the edge of his blazer where the new will sat. She has no idea what kind of show it's about to become.
The dinner bell chimed. Guests found their seats, the stage lights dimming in anticipation. Thomas guided Mary to their table at the front, his face giving nothing away. Candlelight danced across the tables as dessert plates were cleared, the room quieting for the toasts. Elizabeth rose and glided to the stage, a microphone appearing in her hand as if by practiced design.
Mom, Dad, 50 years. You've built a legacy that has touched everyone in this room. Tonight, I want to honor that legacy with a new tradition, something that brings us all closer.
There it was. The performance within the performance. She's about to read the will.
From her clutch, Elizabeth withdrew the folded old will, its creases showing it had been opened many times. The ballroom erupted in laughter and light applause. A will reading as party entertainment, how eccentric. She held it up like a trophy. The guests leaned forward, charmed by the audacity.
Read it. Every word she speaks is evidence of exactly who she is.
She smoothed the page against the microphone stand, drawing out the moment. The guests hushed. Elizabeth's voice rang out, theatrical and light, as she began reading the old will aloud. She recited a bequest of his favorite fishing rod to a neighbor, drawing genuine laughter from the crowd. Thomas's face remained a mask of pleasant interest, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Beside him, Mary's hand lay flat on the table, but her knuckles whitened as she pressed into the cloth.
And to my daughter Elizabeth, my collection of antique clocks, because she could never manage her time.
More chuckles rippled through the ballroom. The guests were eating out of her hand.
Go on, Elizabeth. Show everyone who you really are.
Kenneth shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his gaze darting between Elizabeth and her parents. Then Elizabeth paused, letting the humor settle before the final weightier bequests. Thomas's hand moved toward his blazer pocket, then stopped. Not yet. The room was still hers. Elizabeth raised the paper to catch the light, her voice taking on a mock solemnity.
And to my son-in-law Kenneth, I leave my complete set of golf clubs, which I never used, because I despise golf.
The room roared. Even Kenneth cracked a reluctant smile, though his eyes stayed wary.
And there it is, the final piece of the exhibit. She's turning my will into a joke at my own anniversary.
Thomas leaned forward, his hands bracing the table edge. The movement was slight, but Mary noticed. Her cool palm settled over his wrist. The gesture was soft, but her eyes were iron.
Why won't she stop? This is going to blow up, and she's too arrogant to see it.
And now the final, most significant bequest to my only child, Elizabeth. I leave the family home and the estate, trusting her to carry on the Reeves legacy.
A beat of silence. Thomas's thumb traced the folded edges of the real will inside his blazer.
Time's up.
With a deliberate push, Thomas scraped back his chair. The sound sliced through the laughter like a warning bell. The room fell silent. Even the waitstaff froze, their trays suspended midair. The festive air evaporated. On stage, Elizabeth stopped mid-word. Her eyes widened as she registered the movement. Mary looked up at Thomas. Her hand rested calmly on the table. She made no move to stop him.
Sweetheart, that's not the current version.
Dad, what are you doing? This is hardly the time for one of your jokes.
It's no joke. That document in your hands? It was replaced 2 days ago.
Confused murmurs erupted. Guests craned their necks to see the patriarch standing solemnly.
You can't just... That's not legal. I'm your daughter. I have rights.
Thomas's fingers brushed the folded paper inside his blazer. Not yet. The room needed to hear her finish. Thomas slid his hand inside his blazer and withdrew the crisp, folded document that would undo her. With slow, deliberate care, he unfolded the new will, the paper crackling in the dead silence. Elizabeth's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Kenneth, but he only stared at his lap. Mary's expression remained serene, her hands folded on the table, a silent pillar beside her husband.
You brought a photograph of a will, Elizabeth. This is the real one, signed and notarized on Tuesday.
You're lying. You would never cut me out, Mother. Tell him this is insane.
You might want to sit down before I read it. This affects you directly.
I am your daughter. You can't do this publicly. This is a party, not a courtroom.
Mary dear, would you like to join me?
Mary rose without hesitation, her hand slipping into his. The couple stood together, facing their daughter like a fortress.
I, Thomas Reeves, hereby establish the Reeves Family Charitable Foundation, with my wife Mary Reeves as sole director.
Foundation? That's absurd. What about the family home?
Thomas continued as if he hadn't heard her, one finger tracing the printed clause.
The family home and all assets of the estate shall be transferred to said foundation, effective immediately upon my passing.
You're giving everything to a charity? You'd disinherit your own daughter for strangers?
His voice was steady, unstoppable. The next words fell like hammer strikes.
Furthermore, the property known as the Lake House is bequeathed solely to my wife, Mary Reeves.
The room gasped collectively. Champagne flutes clattered as guests turned to one another in disbelief.
That's my inheritance. You can't do this. Everyone here can see you're not in your right mind.
I am in my right mind, Elizabeth. Just not in your version of it.
You're lying. This new will is a forgery to keep me from what's rightfully mine.
I heard you, Elizabeth. 2 nights ago, through the study door, you were on the phone with Kenneth.
A collective intake of breath swept the ballroom. Guests placed silverware down, afraid to make a sound.
Once Mom signs the power of attorney next week, we move Dad into Sunrise Memory Care. Those were your exact words.
You're twisting it. We were discussing options. We were worried about you.
And then Kenneth said, he won't fight it. He never fights anything. A daughter who agrees has already decided.
Kenneth's face lost all color. He stared at his wife on stage as if seeing a stranger.
This is a manipulation. You're just bitter because I have my own life, and you're clinging to control.
The room shifted. Sympathies realigned with every breath. Eyes turned from the stage to the couple standing in quiet dignity. Mary's expression remained carved from stone, but her hand now rested firmly in Thomas's grip. She did not speak a word. Elizabeth's wild glare found Kenneth in the crowd. Her finger jabbed at him like a knife.
This is your fault. You told me he'd never suspect anything. You said planning the reading would make it look like a joke.
I never agreed to this public spectacle. You said we'd handle it privately, but you had to have the spotlight.
Mary released Thomas's hand. Her chair scraped softly as she rose, drawing every eye.
Elizabeth, I've known about your plan for 2 years.
The words landed like a verdict. Elizabeth's mouth fell open, her protest dying before it began.
I overheard you 2 years ago, planning to push Thomas into a home the moment you had control. I was the one who told him.
Mother, you couldn't. You wouldn't betray your own daughter. This is some twisted lie they forced you to say.
Thomas placed his hand on Mary's back, the gesture quiet and final. They stood together, a quarter of a century of trust made visible. The room held its breath. Elizabeth's world tilted on a single, irrevocable truth her mother had chosen.
2 years ago, I stood outside your kitchen and heard you and Kenneth talk about Sunrise Memory Care. I told Thomas that night. We waited. We hoped you'd change, but you never did. You only got more calculating.
You chose him over your own daughter. I am your blood. Nothing justifies this public humiliation.
You betrayed this family first. You planned to erase your father while smiling in his face.
Mary, please. This isn't the place. Let's all calm down and talk tomorrow.
Mary's gaze silenced him. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to.
This isn't over. I'll contest the will. I'll drag this family through every court if I have to.
Thomas's hand rested on the back of Mary's chair. He didn't argue. He simply stood. The battle was won. The ballroom buzzed with low, urgent whispers. No one was laughing anymore. A camera phone glowed in the back row, capturing the moment for a future none of them could yet see. Thomas turned to the silent ballroom, his hand finding Mary's. Their union was the only answer that mattered.
We let her spin a story tonight. She forgot to ask if we still had one.
From a side table, a distinguished man in silver glasses rose. Arthur Vance, the family attorney, nodded to Thomas.
As Thomas's legal counsel, I witnessed the signing on Tuesday. The new will is fully valid and executed.
You planned this ambush? You brought your lawyer here to humiliate me.
The room answered with frost. Friends who had laughed now stared into their napkins.
The only story that holds is the one you build with people who trust you. You forgot to build that one.
Elizabeth's eyes flicked around the room, searching for an ally. She found none. Even Kenneth had taken a step back, his face a mask of shame and calculation. The Reeves fortress stood unbreached. The silence stretched like a proclamation. For the first time in her life, Elizabeth had no audience left.
You'll regret this. I'll make sure everyone knows what you did.
Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself back into his chair. He picked up his napkin and refolded it across his knee, as if the interruption had been no more than a dropped fork. Mary adjusted her chair and resumed her seat beside him, her posture as impeccable as ever. Elizabeth's face crumpled. The anger bled away, leaving only a raw, childlike bewilderment. She stepped back, her hand covering her mouth, the microphone now dangling useless from her fingers. Tears traced black mascara lines down her cheeks, but no one moved to comfort her. Thomas lifted his water glass, his hand steady, and took a quiet sip. The couple sat in silence, a fortress of indifference, while the party began to stir back to life around them. Elizabeth swayed on stage, utterly unseen, her final act dissolved into silence. A raw sob tore from Elizabeth as the old will fluttered from her trembling hands to the stage floor. She stumbled backward, then turned and fled. She pushed through the shocked crowd, a blur of burgundy, her shoulder knocking a champagne flute to the floor as she lunged for the side door. Kenneth shouted her name and stumbled after her, his face a mask of panic and shame. The door slammed shut behind him. The ballroom hung suspended in utter silence. Waitstaff halted mid-step. The echo of the slammed door was the final punctuation. Thomas rose once more, his eyes briefly meeting Mary's. No words were needed, a lifetime of trust passed between them. He offered his arm. She took it. Together they began the slow, dignified walk toward the main doors. The crowd parted without a word, faces averted. No one dared meet their gaze as they passed. Behind them, the stage lay abandoned. The fallen microphone hummed faintly, the old will a crumpled ghost on the floor. At the valet stand, Thomas helped Mary into the car, the golden balloons swaying gently against the night sky. They drove away without looking back. The party was over, but their story had only just shed its final pretense. Inside the ballroom, the silence shattered into 100 huddled whispers, guests struggling to reassemble the evening. Some shook their heads in sympathy, others stared into their champagne, scandalized. The golden balloons swayed, oblivious. From above, the room looked untouched, white tablecloths and candlelight, but the wreckage was in the faces. Outside, the valet kept his eyes forward as the Reeves sedan pulled away, its taillights leaving red streaks on the pavement. Inside the car, Mary watched the streetlights blur past, her hand resting on the seat between them. Without a word, she leaned across and let her head fall against his shoulder, her eyes closing against the night. An hour later, they sat on their living room sofa, still dressed for a party that had ended in quiet devastation. Mary's head remained on Thomas's shoulder, her breathing slow. The silence between them spoke more than any speech. Thomas looked at the embers dying in the fireplace and finally let himself feel the grief. Not for the fight, for the daughter he'd lost. 50 years together. Not even their own daughter could break what they had built. The fortress held. A calendar flipped to a new month. The divorce papers sat in a manila envelope on Kenneth's desk. He signed where the yellow stickers indicated, his hand heavy. The blame had finally cemented into a legal end. Across town, 2 packed suitcases stood in Elizabeth's hallway, their owners no longer sharing an address. Kenneth folded a shirt into his own luggage, Elizabeth standing in the doorway, arms crossed and silent. When the door closed, Elizabeth sat on the sofa, the divorce decree on the coffee table. Her schemes had left her utterly alone. Thomas heard the news while Mary poured tea. He set the letter down and looked out the window for a long moment.
Saddest part is, we would have given her everything if she'd just waited.
She wanted it now. That was always the problem.
They sat in the quiet of their living room, the house now holding only the 2 of them and 50 years of shared truth. The foundation would soon open its doors and the lake house would echo with grandchildren's laughter. But tonight, silence was enough. Months later, the foundation office buzzed with a quiet energy Mary had rediscovered. Thomas visited daily, a coffee in hand, leaning against the doorframe to watch her work.
You look 10 years younger.
I finally have my voice.
At home, she nursed her greenhouse, hands in the soil, while Thomas read in his armchair. The lake house waited for weekends, but their weekdays found a rhythm no scheme could interrupt. They no longer mentioned Elizabeth. The name had become a shadow they chose not to step into. Evenings were for holding hands in the dim light of the television, old movies and older love. A framed letterhead on the desk bore the intertwined initials of the foundation they had built to outlast them. 50 years had taught them endurance. The next chapter taught them why it was worth the battle. One evening, the porch glowed in deep amber as the sun surrendered to the horizon. They sat in the old wicker chairs, a silence between them as comfortable as breath.
Do you ever regret how it ended, Thomas?
Regret? I only regret she didn't know us well enough to trust us.
Mary reached over and squeezed his hand, her answer a lifetime older than any word. The air smelled of honeysuckle. The ache was still there, but it had softened into something manageable.
She was always in a hurry. Even as a child, she never learned to wait for the sun to rise on its own.
Maybe one day she'll understand what she threw away.
The last sliver of sun dipped below the trees, gilding their silver hair with fire. They sat in silence, the weight of the past finally resting where it belonged. 2 wedding bands caught the last light, their gold undimmed by decades. Some fortresses are built not of stone, but of shared silence. The camera lingers on their hands, the gold bands glowing with the memory of 50 years. Inside each ring, a date and 2 initials that have never faded. On the wicker table beside them, a letter lies open. The embossed emblem of the Reeves Foundation catches the dusk. The intertwined letters, M and T, a new legacy that will outlast them both. The porch stretches into twilight, the old wicker chairs facing the darkening tree line. 2 silhouettes in a frame of dark wood, perfectly still, perfectly together. The camera pulls back, the house shrinking, the trees turning to soft black lace against the sky. Morning light finds them again as it has for 18,000 days, in the garden they planted together. Thomas places a trowel in Mary's hand. She smiles without needing to look. The last image fades to gold, 2 people, 1 life, and a love that demanded no audience.